The morning after Thanksgiving dinner, I called my property manager and told him to begin the eviction process. Not because I wanted to, because I had been left with no other choice. Let me back up. My name is not important. What matters is that I am 67 years old. I live alone in a 2-bedroom house in Moline, Illinois that I bought 31 years ago for $82,000. And for the past 4 decades, I have worked as a seamstress. First for a dry cleaning shop on Fifth Avenue. Not the one in New York, the one here, sandwiched between a pharmacy and a place that sells lottery tickets. Then, from my own spare bedroom, alterations mostly, wedding dresses, bridesmaid gowns, the occasional suit for a man who refused to admit his waist had grown 2 sizes. I kept my rates reasonable. I kept my hours long. I kept my mouth shut about most things. That is the part people never understood about me, that the quiet was a choice, not a limitation. My son has his father's eyes and his grandmother's stubbornness and, until recently, very little of either of their sense. I raised him on my own after my husband passed. Marcus was 34, a cardiac event. Nothing dramatic in the movie's sense, but the most dramatic thing that had ever happened to my life. My son was 9. I worked. I saved. I put him through state school, then watched him get a master's degree in business administration from a university that charged more per semester than I had paid for my house. I helped where I could. I did not tell him how. He married 3 years ago. His wife comes from money, the kind of money that announces itself the moment she walks into a room, in the cut of her coat and the specific way she does not look at things she considers beneath her attention. She is not a cruel person, I think. She is simply a person who was raised to believe that value is visible. That worth has a texture you can assess on sight. I knew from the beginning she did not think much of me. The first Christmas, she bought me a gift set from a department store, hand lotion, soap, a small candle. It was wrapped beautifully. The note said, "Thinking of you," with an exclamation point that did a lot of heavy lifting. I thanked her sincerely. I meant it. I have never required people to love me, only to be decent. The first sign that decency might be conditional came at Easter. My son had mentioned, casually, that I did alterations out of my house. She asked me at the dinner table. Her parents were there, her younger sister, everyone in linen that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. She asked how business was. I told her it was steady. She nodded the way people nod when they are already thinking about something else. "That's so sweet," she said. "Like a little hobby that pays." My son laughed. Not meanly. He just laughed and moved on to the rolls. I did not correct her. I ate my ham and watched the table and thought about the $32,000 I had deposited that April alone. Here is what my daughter-in-law did not know about me, what almost nobody knew. When Marcus died, I received his life insurance, $240,000. I was 36 years old, alone with a 9-year-old, and I had 2 choices. I could grieve in the way that spends money, or I could grieve in the way that builds something. I chose the second, not because I am cold, because I was terrified. I bought a duplex on Glenwood Street for $112,000, rented both units. Used the income to supplement the sewing, to keep my son in school clothes and summer camp, and later in college without loans. 14 years after that, I bought a small apartment building, 8 units, older construction, needed work, which I learned to do myself through YouTube videos, and a very patient contractor named Herschel, who charged me fair rates because I paid on time and brought him pie. After that came 2 more rental houses. After that came a storage facility on the edge of town that I purchased with a business partner who has since retired and left me the full share. I am not a millionaire in the way people imagine millionaires. I do not vacation in places that require a passport. I drive a 2014 Buick LeSabre with a crack in the dashboard that I keep meaning to address. I buy my clothes at Cato and occasionally Kohl's when there is a sale. My house is the same house I have lived in since 1993. I take my coffee with 2 sugars and I watch the news at 6 and I go to bed by 10. But my net worth, the last time my accountant ran the numbers, was just over $2.1 million. My monthly rental income alone exceeds what most people in this town earn in a year. I had never told my son the full picture. I had helped him in ways that didn't announce themselves. Paying down the last of his graduate school fees directly so the balance just disappeared, co-signing a car loan, and quietly making several payments when he fell behind. Giving him what I told him was a little help toward the deposit on his and his wife's first house, when in fact I had provided the entire down payment. He thought it was $20,000 from savings I had scraped together. It was $75,000 from an account he didn't know existed. I had my reasons for the privacy. Some of them were about protection. Some of them were about wanting my son to build something himself, to not lie down in the shape of what I'd made and call it his own accomplishment. Some of them were, if I am honest, about wanting to be loved without the complication of being wealthy. I had seen what happened to people when money entered the room. I did not want my son looking at me and seeing a number. His wife, I suspected, would only ever see the number. Thanksgiving this year was at their house. A beautiful home. My son had done well at the Ludstickst firm. His wife worked in marketing for a regional hospital group. They had built genuine income of their own on top of the foundation I had quietly provided. The house was in a development west of town, 4 bedrooms, an open floor plan, one of those kitchen islands that seats 6 people and makes you feel like you are in a magazine. Her parents were there, her sister and brother-in-law, their 2 children, my son and daughter-in-law's baby, 11 months old, who I had been looking forward to seeing more than I had looked forward to almost anything in recent years. I had brought a gift for the baby. I do this every time I visit, something handmade, because that is what I know how to make. This time it was a quilt. I had spent the better part of 6 weeks on it, hand-pieced, a pattern called Grandmother's Flower Garden, done in yellows and soft greens, and ivory that matched the nursery I had seen in photographs. I had embroidered the baby's name in the corner. I had lined it with the softest batting I could source. It was, without any false modesty, one of the best things I have ever made. I gave it after dinner when we had moved to the living room and someone had put on football that nobody was really watching. I handed my daughter-in-law the box. I had wrapped it, tissue paper and a ribbon, nothing elaborate. She opened it and held up the quilt. There was a pause, not a long one, maybe 3 seconds. But I have been reading rooms my entire life, and I know the difference between a pause that means this is beautiful and a pause that means, what do I do with this? Oh, she said. You made this. I did, I said. Took me about 6 weeks. Her mother leaned over to look. How darling, she said in a voice that belongs in the same category as bless your heart. My daughter-in-law smiled. The smile was real. Enough. I'll give her that. And said, that's so much work, honestly. She folded it and set it to the side. Her sister was already handing the baby a different gift, something that's electronic, something that lit up and played a song, and the baby lunged for it with both hands, and everyone laughed, and the quilt sat in its tissue paper beside the couch, like something that had been left behind by accident. Later, in the kitchen, I was helping clear plates. My daughter-in-law and her mother were at the counter, and I came in through the doorway, and they had not heard me. So sweet that she made it. I just don't know where we'd even put it. You can donate it, her mother said. Places take those. I know. I just feel bad. She clearly put so much time into it. Well, her mother said, and she said it with the gentle authority of a woman who has never second-guessed herself. What else does she have to do? I stood in the doorway for a moment. Then I set the plates on the counter quietly and said I was going to check on the baby, and I went into the living room, and I sat down next to my son, and I watched football for 20 minutes without seeing a single play. My son, to his credit, noticed something was wrong. He asked me in the hallway if I was okay. I told him I was tired. He accepted that because it was easier to accept that. What he did not notice, what he could have noticed if he had been paying attention, was that his wife's mother had picked up my quilt later in the evening, examined the embroidery, and said loudly enough for the room to hear, "Did she do this all by hand? Can you imagine having that kind of time? And my son had laughed. The same laugh as Easter. Moving on to the next thing. I drove home in my Buick at 9:15. The crack in the dashboard was very visible in the light from the highway. I thought about my husband. I thought about the duplex on Glenwood, the first one, how I had walked through it alone on a February afternoon 16 years after his funerals, and thought, Marcus, look what I made. I thought about 6 weeks of evenings with the quilt on my lap and the television on low and the satisfaction of making something that would last. I thought about what else does she have to do. That night I did not sleep well. I got up at 4:30 and made coffee and sat at my kitchen table and looked at my hands, seamstress hands, the kind that have small calluses in specific places, and I thought very carefully about what I wanted to do next. I called my accountant on the Monday morning after Thanksgiving. I want to restructure some things, I said. What kind of restructuring? Doris asked. She has been my accountant for 19 years. She knows me well enough to hear the thing underneath the thing. The Glenwood property, I said. The one with the Birchwood Street address attached to the second parcel. There was a brief silence. That's the one your son is renting, she said. Yes, I said. At significantly under market rate. Another silence. How under market? His current rent is $940 a month, I said. Market rate for that unit is currently $2,200. I see, Doris said carefully. My sons and his wife did not know that the building they rented their office space from. My daughter-in-law ran a small consulting side business. My son used the second room for his remote work 2 days a week. Was mine. They had rented it through a property management company. The property management company was mine. The name on the LLC was not mine in any obvious way. I had structured it that way a long time ago, initially out of habit, later because I was glad I had. I'd also like to revisit the terms on the private mortgage, I said. Another silence. Longer this time. When I had provided the down payment for their house, I had done it through a private mortgage agreement, drawn up by my lawyer. Doris had referred me, a good man named Gerald, who works out of a small office off the interstate. The agreement was real, signed, legal. My son believed he had taken out a standard mortgage from a lender. He had not looked closely enough at the paperwork to notice the lender's name was an LLC. He had no reason to connect to his mother. You want to call it? Doris asked. I want to have the option, I said. I want Gerald to review what the terms permit. I'm not making any final decisions today. Okay, she said. I'll have him pull the documents. I hung up and finished my coffee. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the November yard was brown and flat, the way Illinois gets when the year is winding down. I had put up a bird feeder the previous spring and a chickadee was working at it, industriously, unaware of and uninterested in anything happening inside the house. I thought about what else does she have to do, and I thought about my son's laugh, and I thought about the quilt sitting beside the couch in its tissue paper, and I thought, I have been quiet my entire life, and it has built me something substantial, and that is not the same thing as being a woman who can be dismissed. I did not call my son. I waited to see if he would call me. He called on the Wednesday. Small talk first. The baby had a cold, nothing serious. Had I gotten home okay? The traffic on the holiday was something. Then he said, Mom, I think I might have. Was everything okay at dinner? You seemed a little quiet. I'm usually quiet, I said. Yeah, but... He stopped. I could hear him searching for the shape of the thing without being able to name it. Did something happen? I thought about telling him. I thought about my husband, who used to say that the most expensive thing in the world is letting a problem fester because are too uncomfortable to name it. I thought about the quilt. I thought about, can you imagine having that kind of time? I heard your mother-in-law and your wife talking in the kitchen, I said, about the quilt. Silence. Mom, I'm not asking you to do anything about it, I said. I just want you to know that I heard. He apologized. He was genuinely sorry, I think. My son is not a bad person. He has just been living adjacent to a set of values that are not the ones I raised him with, And proximity is a powerful thing. He said his wife had meant no harm. He said his mother-in-law could be thoughtless. He said he should have said something. Yes, I said, you should have. We left it there. I told him I loved him. I meant it. I hung up. 3 weeks later, Doris and Gerald sent me the full picture on both the office rental and the private mortgage. The office rental could be transitioned to market rate with 60 days' notice under the lease terms. The private mortgage had an acceleration clause that my son had signed without reading closely. Most people don't read closing documents closely, which is something Gerald had warned me about as a risk, but which I had not considered would one day apply to my own child. I did not accelerate the mortgage. That was never what this was about. But I did send a notice of rental adjustment through the property management company. 60 days. Market rate as of February 1st. My son called 4 days after the notice arrived. He was confused, a little panicked. The office space was a budget item. They had built their monthly expenses around the 940 number. 2200 would require rearranging things significantly. Who owns that building? He asked. I thought it was some investment company. It is an investment company, I said. Well, do you know who? Can you talk to them? Do you have a contact? Because this seems like it came out of nowhere. There was a long pause. On my end, not his. Honey, I said, the investment company is mine. The silence on his end lasted so long I checked to see if the call had dropped. What? He said finally. The building you rent your office from, I said, is part of a property portfolio I have been building since you were 9 years old. I own it through an LLC. The property management company is also mine. I kept the rent low because you were my son and I wanted to help you, the way I have been helping you in various ways for a very long time without making a production of it. Another silence. Then, Mom, what are you? How much? That's a conversation for another time, I said. What I want you to understand right now is that I am not a woman who has nothing to do. I am not a woman who quilts because she has run out of options. I am a woman who has been building something for 40 years while people decided, based on my car and my house and my hobby, that they understood what I was worth. He came to see me that weekend. Alone. He sat at my kitchen table and I made coffee and we talked for 3 hours, the longest real conversation we had had in years. I showed him, not everything, but enough. The portfolio overview Doris had prepared for refinancing last year, the storage facility, the Glenwood duplex in its original deed, with my name on it, dated 1997. He cried. I had not expected that. He is his father's son, and his father was not a crier, but there he sat at my kitchen table with his face in his hands, and I put my hand on his back the way I had when he was 9, and the world had just taken his father, and I said, quietly, I know. Why didn't you tell me, he said. Because I wanted you to build something that was yours, I said, and because I wanted to be loved for the right reasons. He understood the second part. I could see it land. He talked to his wife. I do not know exactly what was said. I was not there, and I did not ask. What I know is that she called me herself 2 days later, and the call was not comfortable for either of us, but she made it, which required something from her. She apologized. Not a performing apology, not an elaborate one. She said she had not meant to make me feel small. She said she had grown up in a world where worth looked a certain way, and she was not proud of that. She said she hoped I could understand that she was trying. I told her I appreciated the call. I meant that too. We are not fixed. Families do not fix in a phone call, or even a season. But my granddaughter, the baby who is now 13 months old and has 4 teeth and a very strong opinion about bananas, has a quilt on her crib that I made with my own hands, 6 weeks of evenings, every stitch placed with intention. My daughter-in-law put it there herself. She sent me a photo. The baby was reaching for the embroidered corner, the letters of her name. I have the photo saved on my phone. I look at it sometimes in the mornings with my coffee before the news comes on. In February, I bought myself something I had been thinking about for a long time. Nothing grand, a small house, newer construction, on a quiet street, about 2 miles from where I live now. 3 bedrooms, good bones, a kitchen with enough counter space to actually work in, no rattling pipes, windows that seal properly against the Illinois winter. I am not moving because I was unhappy in my old house. I am moving because I have spent 40 years making sure everyone else had what they needed, and I have reached the age where it is no longer greedy to want something comfortable for myself. I close on it in the spring. I will bring the bird feeder. Some people look at my hands and see someone whose life has been small. I look at my hands and see 40 years of work, 2.1 million reasons to trust my own judgment, and one quilt that is currently being loved exactly as it was made to be loved. That is enough. That has always been enough.